que vous épuiserez à mort avec nous.
Hello and welcome to another bonus episode of Kill James Bond. I'm Alice Caldwell-Kelly, joined as always by my friends Abigail Thorne and Devon.
Hey.
And we got a guest. We got ML Kajera on.
Hello.
Author, published in The Nation, LA Review of Books. Too qualified for this podcast.
Yeah, we were saying before we started, Emma, you're the most legit guest we've ever had. Like, why are you here?
Because Devon's my friend, and when a friend asks you on a pod, it's kind to, just hop on. And more importantly,
when a friend asks you on a pod,
sure.
you say, no, I'm busy.
You say, yeah, sure, and then you never get around to it.
Yeah.
But
this is trash. This is for hogs.
I'm also a long-time listener. Like, I love James Bond. Listeners, I'm an African. I'm from the Gambia, a country that shouldn't exist, but the British had other ideas.
Sorry
Much
about
like Britain
that.
in
Yeah.
that sense.
yeah, it was one of his lesser known operations. But we brought you on because Devon picked a good film for us to watch for a change.
Yes, I didn't even really pick this. This was introduced to me by ML. And I went, holy shit, this is so good. We need to talk about this on Kill James Bond. However, it would be completely impossible to do this without a guest that knows what's up. So, things being as they are, they all just sort of knitted together.
Yeah, absolutely. We watched Jean-Luc Belot's Saloum, which is... How do we describe this movie going into it? He builds it as a southern, like a global southwestern, right?
Yes, exactly.
I thought it was a very odd direction for the OSS 117 franchise to go.
Well, they made an OSS 117 movie, like the third one, set in Africa, which is... I have some thoughts about that movie.
Where in Africa is it set?
I think it's meant to be like like a thinly fictionalized Congo, I believe.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
But yeah, no. So yeah, we watched Saloum, which I came to this through because everything is cable now, right? So you have to pay for little Amazon Prime subscriptions with ads. I got this through Amazon Prime's Shudder thing, which is for horror, and I immediately felt like a bit aggrieved by this because, first of all, like that's vastly limiting the distribution it's going to get, and second of all, it like limits your expectations going in, because this is, I would place this movie in a similar sort of thing as like High Plains Drifter, or a much worse movie, which I also am probably going to talk about in the course of this episode, Bone Tomahawk, in being it's like a Western, but it's got horror elements at the same time. And if you go into it from, this is the horror channel,
Yeah, which is fascinating because the director, Fabuleux, and the producer, Pamela Jubb, they were talking about, they don't see it as a horror. To them, it's a terror, which is just a little detailed difference that I found fascinating because, not to spoil too much for the listeners, but there are spirits in the film. And the spirits themselves are protective spirits in the real actual belief of the people there. So it would feel a bit odd to call them a horrific thing, where it's like the terror you have for deities, for spirits. Kind of like that, it wasn't an AMC show where it's about a British exploratory group in the Arctic
Terror
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And that is obviously about indigenous belief too. And like the creature that is based off indigenous belief. So it kind of made sense to me of like, that's why this is called a terror, because there is a little...
For sure. You're feeling like awe, I guess.
Exactly.
So we begin with a little narration which tells us that revenge is like a river whose bottom was reached only when we drown, which is nice, sets up things nicely. And then...
hardcore.
Yeah, we go to Bissau, in Guinea-Bissau, south of Senegal and the Gambia, where there has been a coup d'etat, we're informed. The military is therefore cracking down on drug traffickers, and the result is a pile of bodies through which we see 3 pairs of shoes proceed in time. This movie loves shoes, which I really like about
the direction in this bit, like with the shaky cam, is so good.
Right?
Yeah.
And the way the music syncs up with their steps, especially, I thought I actually started dancing when I first saw this. when the song
It's-
that
Yeah,
plays,
that was
really
a cool
good.
choice.
the song is
Yeah, it's the bit
Malembe.
where like I kind of sat back in my chair and I was like, oh, this is going to be an actual good film. What a change. I only ever get to see bad films for this podcast. But yeah, so we see 3 mercenaries wearing actually really cool sort of like capes, like ponchos.
Yeah, like rain ponchos.
Yeah, they've already killed everyone there. And they are distributing these like death cards. It's like a pack of playing cards with a hyena motif on the back.
Hard as all
and
hell.
we see one of them.
Insanely
Yeah, look,
significant.
I'm always doing this. I'm always leaving Kill James Bond cards on my victims.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we see one of them like blow powder into the face of a soldier and knock him unconscious. And we're like immediately setting up. Okay, these guys are cool. They're deadly. Also, one of them is magic. Great. And they kick in the door and they capture, although as we later see, rescue a drug trafficker. Along with a case full of gold bars.
Also, the case has a spectre octopus on it, which is quite
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And it's a little bit of a scene from Tarantino where just looking at the gold, and the director below lists Tarantino as one of his influences when he was younger, of like specifically of I saw that people who weren't rich could make films, which is like I guess that's part of Tarantino's backstory, right? Like he's a bit of an underdog figure in the film world.
This did make me think of Tarantino, but in kind of a different way, in that I saw the influence, right? But I also thought this is exactly the kind of movie that Tarantino likes to steal from.
Yeah.
And I just had a sort of a vision of some British or American director ripping off this sequence, executing it worse, and then in the course of being interviewed by like Total Film or whatever goes, yeah, it's actually like an homage to this Senegalese film called Saloum, and everybody sucks him off about how like well read and like widely traveled he is.
You've been looking at my plans for Philosophy Tube again, haven't you?
I genuinely think that there are things that Abula does with this that are like better than what Tarantino would have done. There's a bit before they kick in the door to rescue this guy where like the music cuts out that I think Tarantino would not have done. I think Tarantino would have kept that going through. And I think it would have been a weaker movie.
Yeah, the audio direction in this thing, I'm not there's a lot of innovation. Like I'm not sure Herbulot or Job are the first to do it ever, but there's so much done in the film that's just like blew my mind and felt refreshing, and while still connected to like African cultural cinema practices. Like there's a lot that just goes straight back to Sembène, like the thing you talked about with the playing with the audio. Sembène does that in his films too. There's a scene later that where someone screams and it's a flute plays and it's this beautiful thing. And Sembène does stuff like that. Sembène Ousmane is a phenomenal Senegalese francophone director who.
Yeah, I noticed that too, actually. And one of the things that struck me about, because there's a couple of times where this happens where like a character screams or cries and it's like replaced by a musical sting, and it seemed it stuck out to me because it seemed like something from a different era of movie making, something that like I've seen in movies from like the 70s maybe.
No, exactly.
And it was like it was strange, but like it was compelling to see it again.
Yeah.
But so we see our mercenaries, who we are told are called Bangui's hyenas.
Bangui.
Who have Bangui, excuse me. I'm gonna look, I apologize in advance because I'm gonna fuck up every single point where I can fuck up in this. But so we see them. They rescue this drug trafficker Felix, who is to me kind of one of the weaker characters in the movie.
Yeah,
he doesn't get to do much. Definitely.
Yeah.
No,
he's actually just, like in an unusual white majority cast, there's one black guy, and regardless of the actor's skills, he's just not going to do much. And it's like, this is a 90% Senegalese production. This is what it feels like.
Fair point.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
actually deeply funny because there are like maybe 4 white people in this film, and they're used so rudely as well, which I like. I really enjoy.
Yeah, and it's like, No, it's we'll get into it later, but like it is a bit of a satire. Like there's a satirical element of not just the Western genre, but the Western approach to Africans in film, right? And like we get quite a few jokes off of that, and it starts off with Felix and just the way he's treated.
They get Felix in the plane. Felix is immediately sort of ambiently furious and threatening all of them. And then this scene kind of, to me, part of the reason for this is that he's the weakest actor in the fucking plane, right? But they get him in the plane and there's a fuel leak. They're trying to fly north to Senegal. But with the fuel leak, they'll never make it as far as Dakar, which is where they've been paid to deliver Felix to rescue him for the cartel. And so they're forced to land.
Well, first, Felix is kind of being a bit of a dick to them, and the magic one, Papa Midnight, or Papa Minuit, just like blows magic powder in his face and just totally knocks him out, which is insanely cool. Also, like, I just want to talk about, like, the look of Papa Minuit, who has like white dreadlocks and like a white beard. He just looks insanely cool. He looks like a cool wizard. It's just
he's the character design. Yeah.
And I think the way that you talk about the character design, that's probably because Herbulot he wanted to be a comics artist at one point, a graphic designer, and you can kind of see that through the fashion in the film. It's because he's also he was a music video producer at one point, and he's just into fashion, and like the aesthetic of the film is just so on point. Like I love most aspects of it, but the aesthetic is what brought me in, because it's just like, if you keep up with West African fashion trends and see how that relates to like other aspects of other cultural aspects of our art, and it's just such a beautiful marriage where of course these mercenaries are the most fashionable people on the fucking continent. Like, you know what I mean?
Like Rafa, the pilot, has Versace shoes and he like accidentally gets the buckle off, and it's so good, man.
Yeah, it's great because they're forced to make a landing in southern Senegal in the Saloum. And the first thing we see, it misses having a landing scene, but on the other hand, I don't want it to do the sort of like without remorse thing where you like use all the budget on that and nothing else. But we get on the ground, and the first thing we see is our pilot, Rafa, 1/3 of the hyenas, buffing his Versace loafers, and he like knocks the buckle off of them, and the line is great. I think it translates well enough that I just want to put it in as a drop.
Oh, putain de merde!
He's so good. He's so cool.
It's so good. He specifically says, like, holy shit, those Ghanaians messed up my Versace, which is
it's great. Rafa is. We immediately see his role in the Hyenas. We're now introduced to the second of three of them. He's the big guy. He's the muscles. He's the enforcer.
He's the tank.
Again, we know Devon. We know that the second Rafa stepped on screen, I pointed straight at it and I started reciting for like Adam Levine sects. I was like, holy shit, I'm now obsessed with you.
Your body is absurd.
Oh, God.
He's so cool. Because, again, it's this little pops of color that they use, because it's he's got this like bleached beard and he's wearing these like red sunglasses. It's phenomenal character design.
They're all insanely cool looking motherfuckers.
Yeah.
And he goes off with the third hyena, their leader, Shaka, who is the brains.
The brains.
Monsieur Cerveau, right?
Yeah.
He's the one with the plan, and his plan is to immediately bury the case full of gold with the coordinates, and then he knows somewhere. He knows a camp that they can get to. They traverse.
Yeah, he's got an Airbnb in the back pocket. He knows where to go.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
But before they go, they figure out that the fuel line was breached not by a bullet as they were taking off like they thought, but actually it's a knife. Somebody has sabotaged them. So they have to walk 8 hours through the desert to this camp because they want to get resin to patch it up and fuel for the plane. And they just walk 8 hours through the desert or run carrying Felix.
Yeah, their initial assumption is that Felix has betrayed them, and like he has paid a team to take them out and then rescue him, so that he doesn't have to pay them the gold or something. I
salute their courage. If somebody told me you have to walk 8 hours through the Senegalese desert carrying a Mexican man, I'd be like, I'm gonna die now.
Yeah.
So just sit down and
just lie
die.
down.
I'm not gonna ruin my Versace any further. Actually, I'm just gonna sit down and accept the end.
Like he swaps to some sensible trainers for the journey, and then changes back into the Versace when you get there. Classic.
No, exactly.
That's what I do.
It's a fascinating little moment because it opens into one of the first major themes of or motifs of the film, which is that hiding things leads to paranoia and more tension, right? That we know that of the four people in the scene, Felix, Rafa, Papa Minu, Shaka, one of them is hiding something because this was an inside job that fucked up. So that causes that introduces us to one of the themes of.
I was a little bit disappointed that we don't come back to the gold case. I thought that in the final act of the film was going to be like a race to get back to it, or like it's not going to be there, or somebody else moves it. I was like, okay, this is our valuable thing, but we just kind of never see this again. I
have some confusing issues about the ending, but we'll get to that. But then. In this scene, did you pick up on this is just like, it's a good like location, a series of location shots, but this is like just the quintessential shots from Westerns where our heroes are riding on their horses through the desert, and you've got the horsey clip-cloppity music shit going on in the background, and I thought this was part of the parody of the film where it's like, there are no fucking horses here. Poor Rafa.
Yeah, they're just running.
Right.
Yeah, there's a great shot where they like sort of crawl to like the crest of a hill, where like in your Western they would like find a bunch of horses tied up, and it's a boat, it's a canoe, which they steal, and they get on the river and go to...
Yeah, but before they can get on the boat, Shaka is afraid of the water. He will not get on that boat unless he gets knocked up. I mean,
if we're sort of like working on a theory that this is a group of three people, of whom one is very, very large, very muscular, one of whom is, nominally the smart one, but perhaps sort of in over his head a little bit, suffers from weird travel anxiety,
keeps trying to join the
police. I'm just saying, there's some parallels
the
here.
third one is, does that mean I'm magic somehow?
Yeah, I guess so.
By default, I must be magic. I kind of like this.
But so he has Minui knock him out, the same as Felix, to put him in the canoe. Which is, there's two things that I like about this that I want to draw out. First of all is when he does this, it's in the background of the scene. He falls over in the background. The foreground of the scene is Rafa talking to a guy about the boat, and the guy looks over Rafa's shoulder to see Shaka has just collapsed, and Rafa grabs his chin and is like, hey, look at me instead. It's such a great little character moment.
Yeah. It's really seductive and charming.
Yeah. And the second thing is the camera work on this is once he's unconscious and once they put him in the boat, there is I'm a sucker for this. I have mentioned this in the last two movies we talked about. But if you suspend a camera over an actor's head to convey someone being kind of like out of their own body, I always go, that's really good. I should talk about that on the podcast.
No, that's cinema right there. It's
amazing.
To me, that's cinema. Yes.
Every frame.
It's so good. It's like, oh my God.
So they wake Shaka and Felix up at the far end of the journey where they've gotten to this place that Shaka knows about, and we get to introduce probably one of my favorite genders, which is innkeeper who is slightly off-putting.
Yes.
I love this type of guy in absolutely anything. We meet the proprietor of a camp called the Baobab.
And Shaka's like, don't worry, I know the proprietor, and then greets Omar by name, and I was like, do I know you? I've got a photographic memory, I don't quite recall. And he's like, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
sort of it's not the most subtle piece of foreshadowing,
It's not.
but I really like it
the
too.
film does not do subtlety. In fact, in this like
No.
for particularly West Africans, this scene, just that the fact that the camp is called baobab, which is a tree that's found in lots of places in Africa, but in many West African places, it's the place where the community leaders and the other community meet to discuss problems. It's meant to be a peaceful place, a place of gathering, and that kind of just sets up that we have these mercenaries coming in here, and then we have this shifty fucking innkeeper that just sets up the larger stakes that we know are coming, you know?
Oh, so it's like an ironic name.
Yeah.
You'd recognize that as an
and it also sets up the fact that we actually do see baobab trees later, and there's also interesting things done with their meaning in larger West African culture.
So all of the cabins are full, and Chaka just immediately gives me the nod, like go like arrange something about
the whites, and he goes, all right,
I'm gonna put my creepiest guy on this. And then we just sort of like skulks into the back of the scene, and in the next scene we see like some of the visitors just screaming in terror and fleeing for their lives.
These background characters that are scared out of it are some of the only white people in the film. And I think that cannot be not a specific choice. It's just like, it's so good.
I mean, Omar comes back and he's like, it seems 2 cabins have become available.
Right?
Yes.
I love Omar's delivery of I just love his delivery of almost everything, but like he's just such a obviously shady guy, but like he's still charming you, right?
Yeah.
You know, and it's I love it.
It's really sinister, and he plays with Rafa a little bit by getting him to drink in the bar, and then explaining the sort of like the vibe of the camp, which is you don't pay. Let's just say you don't pay with money.
Yeah,
but you and then the light immediately comes back up, and he's like, no, you just pay with work. It's normal. It's normal here, actually.
You just do some chores. You pay what you feel like you owe us, but everyone has some chores to do per day to keep the camp running. Like, it's a nice little arrangement, but he waits until Rafa's had a drink and then tells him what the price of having a drink is. And Rafa is so mad about it immediately. Really, really good.
So we have this Faustian character. We have the Faustian character of Omar, and I thought it was important to mention that one of the first lines that comes out of his mouth when he's welcoming our trio is he quotes Dante's Inferno. He says, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here."
Yeah, I gotta be honest.
Yeah, that was an odd
If I
choice,
rolled up to a locale and the first thing the guy who ran it said was "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here," I would be like, you know what? There's probably another one down the road.
Turning around.
Yeah, I might roll up to a different locale.
Yeah.
Right. Like he fucking Castlevanias them, and they're like, okay, no, this is fine.
Well, to be fair, they are the scariest motherfuckers that they know. So
that's
if
true.
If the three of us rocked up to a locale and somebody said that, I'd be like, well,
we are the scariest and best dressed people in 500 miles. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Plus, Chaka is like kind of keeping secrets about this, and Rafa and Minwi that night try and sort of like puzzle out what's going on. To which Minwi can only sort of divine that there is a malign presence. Like he says, there is an eye on us, and that Chaka is hiding something. He won't say what, but he's here for a reason, and he's preparing to do something terrible. Which. Great, perfect stakes.
Yeah, no less than like 2 times Minwi leans into Chaka and goes, "You are hiding something and it's going to get us killed." And Chaka's like, come on. And just cracks on with what he was doing. And you're like, buddy.
Yeah. So we have to go to dinner.
Yeah, we get to meet the rest of the
when we
cast.
Introduce.
I love this
the rest
scene.
of the
This
cast.
scene's like a play.
It's a perfect
It's
scene.
one of the best scenes
Both
in
the dinner
movie.
table scenes are fucking phenomenal.
Yes. So first of all, we meet Omar's. He calls him his left arm, his right hand, I guess would be your English idiom, Salaman. And this is great because another one of my favorite genders, the weird off-putting guy's second weirder, more off-putting
Right?
guy, the Torgo to his Manos. It's perfect. I love a henchman. And so Salaman is making the food, and he's also kind of hesitant and nervous and a little bit servile around the other guests. And it's like, interesting. Wonder what's going on there.
And specifically, Salaman, the other guests speak in French, but Salaman is the only one who consistently speaks in Wolof, right? Which is the language, the non-colonial language spoken in, one of the many non-colonial languages spoken in Senegal, which I thought was an interesting choice.
So we meet the other people staying there. We have a couple an ex-couple who are fighting but are still working together. This would be Younes and Sephora, and they're
artists, collaborators.
I think Younes gets called a comedian later, but I'm not sure if that's
derogatory. I think.
Yeah,
he's a rapper, and he sort of dresses in such a manner, and him being a rapper comes back later on.
And the actor who plays him, who I believe is called, his name is Canabass. His name is Canabass. He's a Senegalese musician.
And we also have Awa, who has been staring daggers at everyone but specifically Shaka from the second he sets foot in the camp.
I fucking love Awa, and I love the way this scene is like, let's all sit down to dinner, and like you expect it's going to be like, let's very slowly build the tension. But instead, it immediately fucking ratchets up the tension because Awa is deaf and mute and only speaks sign language, but we are given subtitles. And Chaka and Rafa also speak sign language. And Awa immediately lets them know, I know who you are. Your Bangui hyenas, I'm on to you. Like, fuck you. Either take me with you when you leave, or I will tell everyone here. It's so fucking good.
It's really, really good. And we have this whole conversation because Rafa he quotes Thomas Sankara, which I really like. He quotes him 2 units. And I like this because it establishes something about Rafa that I think develops later on. There's another point where I want to draw this out, that I think Rafa has sort of a quiet backstory as a disillusioned revolutionary.
That's what I thought too.
Because he references Sankara in a way that is purely ironic. I should also point out the cover that they set up here, the way that Shaka goes into this interaction is we are gold miners with our Mexican investment partner who have come north on vacation. This is the least credible thing you could possibly say. And the great thing about it is they've kind of unthinkingly, because he's the brains, he's the guy who has the plan, they've gone into this interaction with, okay, we got to stay undercover at this camp for 3 days, get the fuel, get the resin, get out. Who do we want in charge of this? Do we want the guy who is very good at intimidating people, the guy who's magic, or Earth's worst liar?
Just
easy choice as far as I'm concerned. Send Chaka right on in there, baby.
Everything Chaka says is like sort of barely restrained irony, and it just gets less and less plausible. Like at one point, Omar says gold miners who speak sign language and who quote Sankara localized entirely within my camp.
Yeah, everyone kind of knows they're full of shit at this point, but they haven't figured out in what flavor specifically they're full of shit.
And Chaka's actor, Yan Gael, who's like great actor, but he can't really hide what's going on, right? In his heart, he just like it's very obvious that he's like. There's a bit where they ask him, "Why are you always fucking wearing gloves?" And he's like, "Oh, I like to keep my fucking hands clean." And it's like, it's just a weird scene. It's awkward. And it's just like, okay, my guy.
He's just like a very shifty guy. And then Rafa makes the pussy league gesture.
Yeah, he sexually harasses Awa because he's a pig. And what's great is, having thus ratcheted up the tension, we got to turn it up another notch because we got to introduce another late coming guest. And this is Omar's friend, Suleiman. And Suleiman he introduces himself as, as Captain Suleiman. And yeah, and Shaka sort of like trying to probe a little bit. It's like, well, captain of what? And he's like, police.
Interesting.
And you kind of know immediately, as does everyone around that table, that everyone has made everyone else. Like,
everyone's fully like. There are multiple points throughout this where like Rafa will just like glance over at Minui and Minui will just shake his head imperceptibly, just to be like, "No, we know they're onto us. Just give it another minute. Just."
And also the captain, he comes in and he plays it. He's like, "I'm here on a very special mission to relax."
Pulls out two beer bottles.
With like two
literally
giant beer bottles.
He hides beer bottles behind his back like he's got guns or something, and he's like, "Ta-da!"
Yeah.
And it's fucking amazing.
I'm with the CIA, chilling. It's awesome.
Omar calls him a professional drinker too, which and we see him drinking the rest of the time until shit gets real, which you can kind of like intuit some things about the professional reputation of the police in Dakar, where he's come from, maybe.
Yeah, they suck. They fucking suck shit. They're horrible.
But so, we have a sort of a nice meal. Nothing happens, ostensibly, and yet sort of under the surface, everyone's fucking thinking about like what everyone else is doing.
If this were a less subtle movie, everyone would be like holding guns under the table and you'd see that. But it's just sort of implied. They do that with their eyes.
Yeah. Like, Awa gets up to leave, and immediately Chaka also gets up, and it's like, you're not even trying to not be suspicious here.
Yeah. So he threatens her, and she is insistent, take me with you. And then after dinner, we get possibly my favorite sort of sight gag in the movie. It's not a movie with a lot of comedy in it, but our next shot is Rafa doing the dishes in the big white washing up gloves and totally shirtless, and it's great. It's like this tough guy who doesn't want to get like washing up liquid on his hands, and something moves outside the bar, and we see him sort of like follow this, and he brings his machete with him.
Another thing is all of the outside shots are handheld throughout this part, and it really sells it. It really sells it.
Oh, I actually missed because you see some just bizarre shadowy creatures in one of the shots where Rafa is cleaning, and I actually missed that the first time I watched it. It's done so quickly and sneakily.
They do another thing in this scene specifically, and they start doing it a lot later on, which is that they're lighting Rafa with a lot of different colors at all times.
Yeah, it's like a really stark yellow at this point. It's like the lighting from the bar.
And there's a green one later, and there's a red one. It's just it's always so good.
It's goddamn video assist and the colored lights, honestly.
They're lighting him with sexual lighting non-stop.
Yeah.
Which is a trend in like films with black people, where I noticed it first in the 2010s, where during nighttime scenes, they just start lighting our skin with different colors because it pops better than trying to recreate natural lighting. And it ties into what...
There's a lot of it in Moonlight, too.
Exactly. And Ava DuVernay talks about it a lot. The Sierra Leonean filmmaker Nikiatu Jusu talks about it, of like, film is entertainment, and everyone deserves to see themselves look beautiful, and that's a thing where like a lot of nighttime shots, like even in some Ben's filming, right? Like he tends to avoid nighttime shots just because they didn't have a lot of the technology to do this. Like he does a lot of day for night stuff. He'll just illuminate people's faces, black people's faces, in certain frames, and then it just kind of looks weird. And then you have this it's such a simple fix of just, let's try lighting them like they're not fucking white people. And
it
creates
works so well.
much
It
more.
pops so hard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it really
exactly.
does. And you can really dig into this. You can get into like the history of how color film stock was developed to work with skin tones and how that was an explicitly racist project of like, well, we're going to normalize this for light skin tones. And you know, how that's sort of been gradually overcome. But so the next morning we see Minui tell Shaka, hey, Rafa didn't come back last night, and we're immediately like, oh,
This
shit.
is such
Yeah,
a good
this is
I
fun.
love this.
They've got him. They've got his ass. And then they, but Omar has called a meeting to assign chores. They go to the meeting. Rafa just sort of like stumbles in with the clear implication that he has been with Sephira all night. He is just sort of like he's been spooked. He just wandered off to just go and get fucking laid.
Yeah, it's
Right?
really funny actually. And then Shaka tells him off, and he's like, "You said to relax." Like,
Yeah, he's like, look, we're here for resin, fuel, and relaxation. I don't see any resin and fuel, so I'm relaxing. It's just so good. But he gives Shaka the ultimatum.
Yeah.
He's like, look, our wasn't the last to arrive. It was the cop. So we can assume that they both know who we are. And there's only one seat on the plane, so who has to die? And during this, the shot is perfectly framed with our and the cops' faces. And they're between the two of them talking to each other. And it's fucking gorgeous is what it is.
Incidentally, the line that Rafa has here, this also goes into my little revolutionary thing, is because Omar is talking about the chores and about his sort of principles of everyone does a little bit of work and he's handing them all out. And Rafa just says, by way of passing, yeah, we should do this before the old man resurrects Biafra.
Right?
And it's
yeah, what's that all about?
Biafra was was a separatist region of, I'm going to really embarrass myself if I'm wrong about this, Nigeria.
Yeah, it's Nigeria.
Which precipitated...
Little, like, correct noise from Price is Right or something.
Just edit that in. Yeah, but that precipitated a civil war, but it was kind of a, like, utopian project initially. And the fact that that's what Rafa chooses to reference is... It's such a...
Oh, clever.
Yeah, it's such a like disappointed revolutionary thing. Like, you know, to make a better world by force of arms is impossible. Therefore, I'm doing this. You know,
specifically because Biafra ended up with the genocide of the Igbo people by the larger Nigerian government. That's what Biafra was. It's not explicitly an Igbo state, but it was a state run by a bunch of Igbo people who wanted to be separate from the Nigerian government because the Nigerian government is awful and has just literally been a series of military dictatorships and with some periods of democracy. Like it's not that distinct from a lot of West African nations' histories, but Nigeria specifically is just this old other gigantic military force.
not to mention all the European involvement in the Civil War as well. But so we assign the tasks, and Rafa is going with Awa to count birds because there's a bird sanctuary. And that's the first thing that we follow. And they have this conversation in sign language where she immediately makes him. She's like, "You are one of the hyenas. I've heard of you. I've heard of everything you've done. Take me with you, or else."
So it's so good that like all of the exposition in the early film comes through Awa. Like it's such a it's so good.
Because the night before, we had seen her with her one of the hyenas calling cards, actually. Like
she has one of them.
Yeah, and you get the sense that like in the conversation they have while they're looking for birds, you get the sense that she looks up to these hyenas. Like she keeps up with all the exploits. She refers to them as heroes. And which is fascinating because the director and the producer were talking about, they wanted to make a film that showed that Africa could have heroes, but they didn't want to make a heroic film. Like they weren't obviously trying to replicate the MCU or anything. It's just the heroes from
for sure,
like Westerns. They're complicated characters, but there is some wrestling with morality within the character, you know?
Well, the thing that I really like about this is that Rafa denies this. He says why do you want to run away with the devil? And she laughs at him and she says, "You devils," which is great because it A, implies there's way worse shit out there, but B, I love this thing from Westerns of like, I am a good guy at heart. I have done many good things. I will absolutely deny it, and I will flee from any kind of positive reputation. It's really good, is the thing. So they have that conversation. Meanwhile,
it's important to note that in the conversation they list a bunch of places that the hyenas have had influence on in their mercenary mission throughout life.
Yes, Sierra Leone. They cleared the RUF out of Sierra Leone, out of Freetown, I think.
They mentioned the Seleka in the Central African Republic, which is actually a very tiny moment, but it ties into larger Senegalese film because the Seleka, the term for the coalition in the Central African Republic that resulted in war, that didn't pop up until 2012, and this film is set in 2003. And that to me was like a reference to like Semben Usman's own anachronistic films where he'll just skip forward a few centuries just like for emotional resonance within a scene. Like, and I thought that was a little play.
Yeah.
And
sort of your hero like exists a little bit outside of time.
Exactly, because they're heroes. They're like, that's what a hero is, like someone who can keep popping up again and again in conflicts throughout Africa like these guys do, but across time too. And especially every conflict
like
that
Link.
Exactly. Yeah. And also kind of like Link,
Mad Max.
Yeah. But like Link being a child soldier, technically, every conflict that
That's true, he is. Okay, we don't talk enough about the Great Deku Tree's child soldier program.
Perfect segue, man. Fucking phenomenal.
Every conflict that they mention involves child soldiers, which becomes important later to the scene, to the film, I mean. So.
Yeah, another theme drops onto the movie. So at this point, we have to go on our second and third chores. We see Minwi go with Salaman to drop off some aid to a village, which like helps sustain the camp. And in another one of my favorite little things, creepy village.
Love creepy village.
Every building has a big R spray painted on it. Not prominently enough that you'll notice it on the first watch, probably, but it's there.
I didn't even see that. That's
and
so
a little,
Hey.
yeah. It's on every building, as is a graffito of like a guy with an old timey revolver. I think he's actually literally wearing a cowboy hat in it too. But so Minwi delivers this aid, and it's weird. It's picked up by some young men who they describe as the wrestlers, and they all have like, I'm not sure if it's what missing an ear looks like, or if it's just been sort of like mutilated in some way. But
like,
like
it looks like it's
scarification.
burnt shut. Yeah, burnt shut almost, right?
Yeah, shot, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to note that, yes, they go to a village, but the village is specified as a Jola village. And the Jola are indigenous to West Africa, but specifically are believed to be, among another few groups, some of the first people to be in the region. Like, it's we'll discuss this later, but it's difficult to apply indigeneity to Africa outside the context of white people, because like, when you don't have just a bunch of annoying people come in and being like, this is our land and they're from fucking Europe, it's hard to know, especially when a lot of our history is oral history. But the Jola, like, it's important to note that the Jola were some of the first people here, because that kind of ties into yet another of the film's themes that we're introduced to later.
So we have that. We go to the village. We see that it's creepy. That's that.
You get another lovely shot of the wrestlers before they pick this up. When they're first displayed, they're staring directly into the camera, which
yeah, it's just weird vibes, and the film creates weird vibes in a very good way.
It sets you slightly on edge because you're just trying to watch a movie and suddenly they're looking straight at you, and you're like, wait, hold on, I'm not part of this, buddy. So it does put you a little bit on edge.
And I thought the interaction with the crowds, right? Like, that's a common thing. Yes, across Semben Usman's films, but honestly, just across a bunch of African cinema I've seen, especially in the more modern bit of it, like with Jusu, with the director of I Am Not a Witch, and a few other modern African films where there's just this interaction with the crowd. With Sam Bennett, goes back to the fact that he learned how to make films from the Soviets, and he was just like a lot of Africans, just a communist.
Oh, it's all fucking Eisenstein. Of course it is.
And like they're drawing from that tradition of crowd work, of the literal masses, and having them interact with the
incredible. Yeah. So Shaka goes with Omar to take care of the fishes of the Delta, which is, we don't know what this is yet. We know that they're up to some shit, and it's going to require the use of BB guns. And what this transpires to be is the only other group of white people in the movie.
The last two.
Very, very sort of like clownish looking Jerk Vanderklerk types loading dynamite onto a boat because they're going to go upriver and fish with it and fish with explosives and fuck the ecosystem. And so in order to protect it, Omar has inveigled Shaka into literally just shooting at them with BB guns until they flee in terror, which we don't see. We see them sight them up with the guns, and then we don't actually see the actual sort of moment of it happening, only them walking back afterwards. And it's a sort of, I don't know how I feel about it. It's played for comedy, and it kind of like, it's a jarring shift in tone is the thing.
It also makes me question something that happens later in the film. So without spoiling it, we see later, shortly, in fact, that Chaka has some historic beef with Omar. And I'm like, okay, why did you not...
beyond beef.
Why did you not bring this up when you had him alone?
That's a beautiful thing for me, of like, when you said the word play there, right? Like, this is a part of the fact that Jean-Luc Rebillot is a fucking gamer. The only the only pieces of media he acknowledges as a direct influence were the video games he was playing when they were producing the film, which were Red Dead Redemption and one of the Metal Gears from the 2017, 2018.
I thought I was going fucking crazy. I was like, do I talk about Metal? I'm imagining that this is like heavily inspired by Metal Gear Solid 5. I'm crazy, right? There's no way. It would be insulting to even bring that into the comparison. I was like, no, it just is.
Right, yeah,
great.
No, like these are like what happens with these tasks that Omar gives out is these are side missions. Like,
fuck's sake,
genuinely, yeah.
It's a bit incongruous.
And we're
with
back
the rest
to
of the
Child
film.
Soldier Link again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but so they're walking back together afterwards, and they talk to each other, and they both acknowledge each other as former soldiers. And they have this sort of like, where did you fight conversation.
I had to get a stone out of a big fish's belly and then take it to a castle. It was a nightmare.
What side quests have you done? And they each talk about different wars, all of which, again, are sort of notorious for the use of child soldiers.
Exactly.
But we don't, like, unless you know that offhand, this conversation seems more sort of like placid than it is. And he asks him. He asks Omar, okay, well, I need fuel, I need resin, sort of dropping the pretense of being gold miners at this point. I need those. Can you help me get them? And Omar says, sure, of course I can. We now go to our final task, which is replanting mangrove swamps. And this is what Felix and Suleiman are doing. And the thing about Suleiman is that he's a fucking badass.
I
He's
fucking
genuinely
love
one of my favorite
Suleiman
characters in this movie.
Yeah. He's so good.
He goes full sort of like 70s cop mode in that the second they're out of that camp, he goes to Felipe and just like claps him on the shoulder and goes, by the way, the cartel has put a price on your head. You have to work with me or you are going to get killed. My guys are waiting to arrest all of the hyenas. And if you don't help me, then you know, I'm going to let them kill you. And then he leaves him literally like squatting in a mangrove swamp with a mangrove seedling in his hand. Just like,
really,
yeah,
about
Very well played.
About halfway through Suleiman's speech as well, like, Felix has been like smoking the entire time and the cigarette just falls out of his mouth. It's really good. Like, it's such a moment of, no, you're so made, brother. You have been fucking made from the moment I saw you. Anyway, plant your fucking seedlings.
There's a lovely bit here where Felix is talking about, he uses the Spanish word for mangrove, and he's like, we have these back in Mexico. And I think that scene was included because Rebelo lists Alejandro Inarritu as one of his major influences, as like he watched an Inarritu film and was like, I need to become a fucking director. And it's like that connection there of like, obviously the Western genre does have some influence with is influenced somewhat by Mexican culture of the same time period and whatnot, and then you have it brought back into just this little personal love letter to Mexican cinema that every little includes, where it's just like, we're kind of the same, you see, and it's just a little fun moment that warmed my heart.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
So we come back to the camp where everyone has now had their little side quest.
And the first thing that happens is Minwei walks up to Chaka and goes, you are hiding something, cunt. You're gonna get us killed. We should leave now. Everything is fucked here.
Yes.
And Chaka's like, let's just sit down for dinner. What's the worst that's gonna happen?
Yeah.
I'll handle it. Just have dinner. Meanwhile, Suleiman literally has one hand on the back of Felix's neck. Like, yeah, he's fine. He's just gonna sit with me for a bit. Shaka excuses himself. He goes to visit Awa, who makes a horrible mistake by opening the door to him and immediately gets jumped and tied up.
Right. Okay, and we see her. We see. Okay, I don't want to skip ahead too far, but like we see her cutting the zip tie later that he binds her with later, and it's like it's just not that thick a zip tie, and she has to have been in there for the entire dinner scene, and like it takes her way too long. It's ridiculous. It's like
I don't know. Those flex cuffs are kind of tough. You got to have the tool for them. But
she has a tiny blade. Yes.
Yeah. So, but with her out of the way, everybody comes for dinner, and Omar's like, well, it's weird Awa isn't joining us, but you know, no one's a prisoner here because irony. And at this point, the mask kind of like really is like almost off. Shaka like gets through about 2 minutes of conversation looking into Omar's face from one end of the table to the other, and then he goes, yeah, it used to be way bigger when I was here, this camp, and also, it used to be sort of way more frightening back when I was here as a child soldier.
Perfect monologue, man. It's so good. He doesn't even say child soldier ultimately. Like, he's just like,
no.
He like looks over the side and goes, wasn't that like a lean-to earlier on against that? It was corrugated. The wind was coming through. The days here are so hot, but the nights can be glacial. This long speech, and the entire time you can see Omar's going, I
may have made
a mistake here.
A mistake, an error.
And it is revealed that Omar was the commander in charge of these child soldiers that Chaka used to be one of, and he escaped. He did have a nom de guerre.
And that nom de guerre was Colonel Remington, because he carried on the battlefield a very heavy, very shiny, very large caliber Remington New Model Army revolver.
Pearl plated as well, gorgeous.
Yes,
it is a beautiful gun.
It's nickel plated and pearl grips.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
And which Shaka has, because as we've sort of seen fleetingly in like little visions whenever he's unconscious or asleep, he escaped and he took it and he like fled into the river with this pistol.
Midway through the speech, he takes his gloves off to reveal that he has those R's that are like burned into his,
like branded onto the backs of both hands.
And then Chaka gets up and just starts.
He fucking just opens fire, bro. Like at the end of his speech, it is clear that there is no response that can be given at this point other than to die. So he just starts fucking firing, just absolutely unloading into his lad. And then like everything's slows down. It's in perfect chaos. Everyone is trying to hide. And it keeps getting...
I'd be interested to learn a little bit about kind of the way they did the firearms tech on this, because I don't know whether it's just the actor convincingly portraying it, but it seems that when he fires the Remington, it has a kick to it. And I guess that must just be him acting that, because if it was blanks, which it would be, it would not have a kick.
There's no way you could put... yeah, absolutely.
I think he just acts that really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, it's a heavy gun. It's got some real sort of like inertia to it. So that's some physical acting you're doing.
Is it a gun? Are those types of guns like still in use? It looks like an old timey. It looked like out of a Western to me. You know, like I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah,
you can get reproductions of them. An old one would be very, very, very like valuable and fragile. It's there because it's thematic and it looks cool. I don't think it's really plausible.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah. So there's a number of things, throughout the scene. First of all, throughout the entire speech, it's like a long speech. It's perfectly acted. We get shots of everyone around the table slowly coming to the realization at the same time. Like the moment he starts talking, Minui puts his head in his hands. Rafa is like, he's upset to begin with, but like the second the gun comes out, Rafa starts immediately considering how he's going to disarm Suleiman. Puts him in, and he does.
Which
so.
He does, yeah.
And throughout the shots where Shaka is shooting Omar, it keeps cutting back and forth between the two actors in present, the adult actor and the current Omar, and a child actor and a much younger Omar. It's phenomenally effective.
Really fucking good.
We learned that Shaka was the one who sabotaged the plane. He wanted to come here all along. Also, the cop is like, well, Lupin, you're the base is surrounded. And Shaka's like, actually, I bribed your mates with the gold. They're not coming. Get fucked. And then the film
it's a really elegant thing.
Okay, right before that.
Yes, before we get mad at Abby.
I think it's important to note that when the scene where Shaka shoots Omar, and they're switching between young Shaka, old Shaka, younger Omar, old Omar, and at one point, young Shaka gives the gun to Omar, and Omar places it within his mouth, and like that's a huge symbol right there, because the film, as we'll learn later, makes a lot of parallels between Shaka and the man who abused him, Omar. And it's kind of like a cautionary tale for Shaka of like, you shouldn't have become like this. And that we learn more about that later. Okay, Abby, please go ahead.
It really does feel like every time I bring a movie, part of the episode is to turn to Abby and go, you didn't like this enough, fuck you. But
yes, why turning big spotlight on my friend? Why are you wrong about
But no, it is completely reasonable if you went in blind.
Yeah, I went into completely blind to this film, and because it's made by a culture that I know nothing about, I also did not pick up on any of the ways in which this was telegraphed. But now there are spirits.
Mm-hmm. Well, as Salaman in his sort of like sort of attendant creep role helpfully informs them as they're sort of like forced into the hut with Awa by a sort of huge overcasting of like what seem to be like flies and smoke and debris. And Salaman immediately does the creepy laughing, what you've done there is you've made an error.
The theme of this movie is if you take revenge, you will die. It is now time for you to die.
Yes, yeah. But the thing is, right, I thought I knew what the like moral lesson of this film was going to be, right? Which was these are bad men. They have gone to a place that is sacred and protected, and the first thing they've done is bury a shitload of drug money in it. They are now shortly going to be punished for their crimes. And that lasted until about the conversation between Rafa and Awa, where we're like, oh, wait a second, maybe... So they are kind of good guys, but it's more complicated than that because it's more political than that. Now we get to the point where Saloum tells them, you've just killed the only barrier between these hostile spirits and us. And to me, again, this is sort of politics by stealth, right? Like, every authoritarian in history has always ruled with the idea of, like, it's only me, only I can hold down this sort of this chaos that is always under the surface. And the second I'm gone, anarchy is going to be loosed upon the world. And they've conducted a kind of like spiritual coup d'etat here. In, I think, much the same way as the coup d'etat in Bissau that starts out the movie. But
well, I gotta say, I missed all of that. And my interpretation of the film up to this point was like, these guys are sick. Dudes rock. Revenge is cool because like Omar was like, I had child soldiers and then they killed him, and I was like, cool, good, this was an unambiguously good thing to do, you should do that.
I did also write down, to be fair, I would watch about a couple of dozen prequel movies about the hyenas just doing their thing.
I thought the rest of the movie was going to be them doing a fighting retreat to the gold, fighting the cops all the way back. I was like, cool, that's great, like cool action movie, finishing this, because I didn't get any of the spiritual like foreshadowing at all, didn't get any of that. And yeah, I honestly, this just kind of came out of nowhere, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess it's just... Also, like, are we supposed to feel that it is bad to kill Omar? I'm like, I don't feel that it's bad to take revenge.
Let me explain you the moral valence of this, right? Because there is what I think is a storytelling weakness in the film, which is they get in the hut and they go, Saloum, explain what the deal is with this. And Saloum explains what the deal is with this. And the deal is that the Saloum used to be inhabited by a people called the Bainuks. There was a land deal in which they gave up their land and betrayed their king, and they beheaded their king. And in the course of doing that, their king cursed the land forever. And that's, I think that this is a sort of often unfamiliar approach to curses outside of the classical sphere in Western narratives, right? Of, it doesn't matter if you're doing the right thing or if you're a good person. If the curse is there, it's fucking there. Like, it being sort of like changed by your goodwill or your pureness of heart. Yeah, maybe, I guess, but you still got to confront it because it's a very real thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's something that has like materially changed the character of the land.
And thematically, when you tie it to like the idea of, okay, this is a curse that we got as a result of previous conflict, right? Like, and you have to remember that the director quite literally grew up in the Republic of the Congo, not the one that was Zaire, but Congo Brazzaville. And he like witnessed war on a first-hand level. It's not that surprising to me that he would interpret curses and all that to a pacifist message. Essentially, that's what the film is about. Of like, we're not meant to actually be violent. It's not great. At least I thought that's what the director was trying to go for. Of that like. Can
we talk about indigeneity at this point,
right?
As well,
so that's a fascinating aspect of that, because like the Bainouk are also, like the Jola, are also believed to be some of the earliest inhabitants of Senegal, and they were pushed out by Mandinka and Serer expansion into the region hundreds of years ago. And Chaka actually says when Salaman is explaining to them about, the Bainouk are here and the king's curse is living and the king is still in power, Chaka actually says, no, the Serer dominate Saloum now. And which is, I thought the director commenting a little bit on the fact that Senegal's first president, who was a great poet, for example, but a little too fond of the French for a lot of Senegalese people, but also just people who don't like colonialism, Senghor, Leopold Senghor is is a Serer from the Saloum region.
Yeah, and like this idea of like your modern country is built on land that has been taken from people, land that like in an American context and a Western context, and I'm hesitant to translate this directly, but I do think there are parallels that you can draw out with the way that Westerns treat Native Americans. In particular, the idea that like these are people who have been wronged, who are capable of spiritual vengeance upon you, is like that's a feature, like Native American curses and stuff. But even like in the more physical sphere, and this is where I want to talk about a much worse movie, which I think in the group chat we have dubbed White Saloum, Bone Tomahawk.
So upset to be hearing about Bone Tomahawk again.
I've never seen it.
Bone Tomahawk. The deal with Bone Tomahawk is that Kurt Russell is a sheriff, and a tribe of Native Americans who have been kicked off of their land have become mutant cannibals, and they try to eat Kurt Russell. It's fucking terrible.
Bone Tomahawk is one of those movies where it's when you talk about it, you're essentially just talking about full caps the scene, and the scene in Bone Tomahawk is where the chief of this tribe cuts a dude in half, like lengthwise, dick first, and it's just. Yeah, it's all fucking there, and it's like, man, I don't need to see this right now. I'm having a nice evening.
Moving to a much lower form of art than Saloum, yeah.
Hot dog style, just chops him right in half with a tomahawk.
So Salaman explains what the deal is, which is, the spirits, they're going to take your senses one by one, that you're safe in the huts because they're repelled by electric light. However, if you're going out there, you need hearing protection. We get the sort of the arming yourself scene from Commando, but one thing I do like is that it is Minwi takes a sort of very central role here, and it's explicitly as important to like spiritually arm yourself as literally.
The director specifically calls Minwi a black magic witcher, because again, he's a fucking gamer, and like
he does have the witcher hair. For fuck's sake,
we gotta stop gamers from making movies.
No, this movie's really good. We should keep them doing it. Just this guy though.
I kept thinking of you're just loading up on like potions and shit. Like I've done this. I've
applying oils to your sword.
It's got a fairy in a bottle, things of this nature.
Yeah, Rafa forgives Shaka for like being a dick, and like he apologizes for the suffering that he's been through.
And I love that they hug.
Yeah, they reaffirm their friendship, which I thought was lovely, just really nice. Like, because obviously these are people who have been together for fucking years fighting. So to hear that like their leader had suffered like this, they're mad at him for betraying them in the way of like making them unwitting parts of this, but they also completely understand of it. Like, all right, we're now in this situation together, and we will get out of it together. And they say
together to the end in various languages, and I thought that was just really sweet, because the hyenas are like, I believe they're called half Senegalese, half Central Afrique, and like they're a multicultural group of mercenaries, and they found love across
just like
cultures.
This podcast.
That's right. But
I need to get more Versace.
Shaka and I go out to try and find more hearing protection for the others using Minwi's Walkman.
Before they do that,
and of course, because I was deaf mute.
Yeah, before they do that though, Awa asks Shaka to give her the Remington gun, and Shaka refuses to let it go.
Yeah.
He refuses to let go, the symbol of just generational violence, political violence that he stole from Omar, which I thought was beautiful. Of like, because I like the relationship between Shaka and Awa, especially because people kind of treat her shittily, but like Shaka is the only one that actually puts hands on her. He's the most aggressive towards her. And like, if you view it as her being she seems like the youngest character in the film, right? And she definitely is the most, she looks up to the hyenas the most as maybe the child soldiers looked up to Omar. And then we see that that Shaka, who again his whole mission is it's implied to try not to become like Omar. He treats her a little bit the way that Omar must have treated him as a child.
Again, though, I'm saying it's good to take revenge against people who kidnap child soldiers. I mean, we also see that Shaka goes to the shack. I mean, sipping forward slightly, Shaka goes to a shack and it's like full of child soldiers and he sets them free, which is a good thing. That's a good part of his revenge.
That's a great thing.
Yes.
I'm once again saying revenge is good. It's good to take revenge. It's good to kill people who take child soldiers.
Watching a movie that begins and ends with the narrator going, "Revenge will drown you." Revenge seems pretty based, actually.
I mean, it's a net good in this film. It doesn't work out that good for Shaka, but it helps a lot of people.
So in the sense of like, okay, but like this is about child soldiers, right? We're wondering how are child soldiers produced? And it's yes, there's lots of different reasons, but in all the conflicts listed, a lot of the times both sides are using child soldiers. It's this thing of yes, obviously freeing child soldiers is good, but what are you doing about the conditions that keep producing them? Because Shaka just becomes Omar. If Shaka just becomes Omar, there's going to be another conflict where he's going to have to justify the usage of child soldiers because everyone else has died or they're just the easiest to control. You know what I mean?
There's a point later on where after the reveal of the child soldiers, which I will talk about here a little bit, which is you can tell, first of all, the absolute fucking weight that this has to Chaka, because he's very clearly been plotting his revenge for years, and he's been biding his time because he thought Omar was had stopped and had settled down. And the moment he gets in that room, he realizes that this has been going on the entire time that he's been waiting. And it's so heavy to him that Suleiman, even the cop that he's just sort of enveiled in this, genuinely reaches out to comfort him in that moment. And the second thing is that it's a child soldier conflict, right? Because Omar was a man who used child soldiers, and now he's sort of quote unquote retired, and he's still using child soldiers. He's still using children as the currency to keep the peace with the Bainuk king. And that using child soldiers as sort of we're not happy to do this, but it does it's a means to an end of keeping peace, is exactly how he would have justified it back when he was using it in a physical conflict. It's the same thing over and over.
It's also it's the way you get out of a war crimes prosecution whenever the US comes to your country and sets up an international criminal tribunal, is to be listen, I'm putting my child soldier army on the path to peace, kind of
exactly.
thing.
It's.
I mean, I do get sort of the vibes off of Omar. To me, are pure Charles Taylor, Joseph Conan,
definitely,
right?
definitely.
There's a lot of guys like that who did not become as famous, and kind of did largely get away with it.
General
so I think
naked.
it's compelling to be no, not this one. Yes. Oh yeah, I very much remember General Butt Naked.
Who's a fucking priest now. He's a priest. After all, he's literal cannibal. He's a literal cannibal. Which, okay, I guess Catholicism and Christianity being about eating Jesus also. Okay, I see.
This is my body. This is my blood.
I see why.
Very familiar territory already.
I see why a cannibal would have been oh, okay, I this is a religion for me. But
it's I get this.
Learning about Catholicism being yo, okay, all right.
A guy whose entire life
cool, that's all I need to know.
is eating other people and abusing children. You're telling me that guy became a priest?
Fine now.
I imagine he'd be disappointed if he'd been a real cannibal. He's just getting the wafer. He's what the fuck is this? I was promised flesh.
Right? Exactly.
There's no blood. This is just wine. Spitting it out.
Yeah. Sorry, let me get my composure. Fuck. It's funny. I also thought one of the inspirations for the character of Omar is a figure common to the Senegalese practice of Islam. In Senegal, the major version of Islam is Sufism, actually, and where there's a bunch of Sufi brotherhoods like the Murids and the Baifals and all that. And one big way that manifests in Senegal is through the figure of a marabout, of like who's like a Muslim spiritual leader, and specifically along the Sufi tradition, usually like a sheikh or something.
Sure.
And usually how this,
which is and Sufism is like very hereditary and sort of like quite isolated into branches as well too.
Yes. The version in Senegal has relations with the version in North Africa, for example. But the figure of the marabout has students underneath him. The word used is talibé, and it literally means like seeker, student. And how this works is the parents are supposed to give their children to the talibé for Muslim education and just general education too. But unlike the talibé, specifically promise the marabout specifically promises to the talibé and the talibé's family that they will give them protection, security, and they'll help facilitate their way into paradise, which are all things that Shaka says Omar promised the children, the child soldiers. And it becomes a parallel there of like where we're not only looking at child soldiers, but I think Khebilo is making a parallel between the plight of child soldiers and that of the talibé, who are actually subject to quite a bit of abuse from their marabout, because the marabout asks them to go work for them, to beg for them, and that the marabout will, for instance, do their 5 daily prayers for the children, so the children have more time to go beg. But there's also in Senegal, there's the constant discussion about the sexual abuse that you imagine would happen in this kind of situation where children just aren't protected enough, you know?
And actually, the narration that introduces the region says it's the land of the great marabout.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
I mean, it makes sense. Right. But so at this point, Shaka goes back to Salaman to be like, do more exposition, explain what the deal is with this.
Because there's all like the spirits running around outside.
Oh,
yeah,
actually,
the spirits running around outside.
I wanted to talk about that too. There's first we need to introduce the spirits. That I actually had trouble with, because what they are they look to me like Kankurang, which is a Mandinka tradition, but the Bainuk were influenced by the Mandinka culture because of the Mandinka expansion into their regions, of course. So the Kankurang, they're these functions in Mandinka and West African cultures, because they're just masquerades, and a bunch of West African cultures have masquerades. And their function is protective. Specifically, they protect new brides, newborns, and newly circumcised young boys from witches and malevolent spirits attracted to the blood that's usually part of these rituals and whatnot. And their design is like my father was a Kankurang for a bit as a young man, and they're based off of a tree. Like they get a bunch of fibers from a tree, and the fibers are usually orange, and then you enshroud yourself in it, and you walk around with swords and dancing. And there's a drum. There are drummers that follow you around. They're the helpers of the Kankurang, and I thought that was a fascinating decision to make these Kankurangs into the monsters of the film, because they do fulfill their function. At no point do we see them actually harm little boys, right? But also the way they move, because I've seen a lot of Kankurangs up close, and the way they move is their legs are always moving, so it looks a little bit like they're flying. Like that's the belief that they can leap over the river and all that kind of stuff. And I just love the way they're designed because of that, because it's a bit of a perversion of it, because if it's meant to be a real Kankurang, it should be orange, but it's like shrouded in death in like just black fibers. It looks more like flies than the fibers of a tree or anything. And I love
it's really compelling.
Yeah, and there's this long shot, especially where it's not. I don't think it's actually a continuous shot properly, but it's edited to look that way, where the only sound is the soundtrack of the talking drum and just the djembe.
I was going to say,
drums
you mentioned the drums just now. I wanted to talk about the talking drum, because that comes in hard at the point where like it swaps to the spiritual half of the film.
The talking drum, the tema is a drum where it's percussion that you can change the pitch of the beats, where like usually it's a drum that you can squeeze, and they hold it in in the crook of their shoulder and then squeeze into it, and the notes will change pitch so that it actually ends up sounding like human speech. I think the first time a lot of Western viewers must have come across it is in the Wakanda soundtrack by Ludwig Göransson, who actually he went to Senegal and like just hired Senegalese musicians like Baba Mal, and they have their leitmotif for the king in that film, T'Challa, is T'Challa. So you hear the da da, you hear that a lot in the Black Panther film, and you hear that a bunch in this.
That's what that was.
Exactly, you hear that a lot in this long fucking scene of them trying to avoid these kankurang, and that's actually a thing. Like when in the kankurang rituals that I've been a part of the celebrations and whatnot, the kankurang will like go after you, like they will chase after you. You're meant to like evade them. Actually, it's a lot of fun. And Herbulot, being as brilliant as he is, recognizes that yes, that's a cultural practice, but it's also ludic. There's a gameplay element to that. I remember as a kid running away from these, being like, the kankurang's gonna get me. Like, it's just. I
remember thinking this sequence is like quite video gamey. That these spirits are on like patrol paths.
They are.
Exactly.
You got so much more out of it than I did, because my notes at this point say, if they are spirits, how come you can kill them with a knife?
Because, well, they kind of aren't.
I understood this to be that the spirits are sort of like riding the guys from the village that we saw earlier. And that there is a person under there in the same way that there would be a masquerade.
There is a more specific type of masquerade called the Ifang Bondi, which that kind of translates to remove oneself from. So like the idea that you've removed your humanity and you've become the Ifang Bondi. So that kind of translates to the idea of spirits riding humans, right? So, because like when I hear the word spirit riding a human, I think voodoo. I think like all that kind of the loas and all that shit. And it's not exactly that, but I do see the parallel. Actually, I never thought about that.
Yeah, sure. So Shaka goes back to Salaman's like explain.
He walks into that building like everyone else is sort of like getting their breath, and he just like walks in, immediately punches Salaman like, no, buddy, we've not been given the full fucking story here.
Yeah, and Salaman doesn't give him the full story either.
Here's something here's something that I found to be all right. Suleiman, first of all, the cop, love him dearly. He's so fucking good. The second everything like changes gear, he has the most phenomenal vibes throughout. But what happens is when Shaka walks in and like punches the fuck out of Salaman, Rafa steps forward to try to stop him, and Suleiman is the one to stop Rafa.
Yeah, that's fun.
Which I found to be,
because he's just seen the room full of child soldiers. He's like, no, this guy shouldn't be killed.
Like,
again.
Exactly.
Yeah, the cop, man after my own heart. Like, yeah, cool. It's good that this man dies. Yeah.
So Shaka, like, correctly, as it turns out, says, listen, there's no way this magical shit is happening just because he wanted to run a hotel, right? He wanted something more out of this than like a
what do you think was going on behind the scenes in Mamma Mia?
There's so many child
what do you think
soldiers.
Cienfuegos was like, I have given up on hope and life.
Look, if you want to go toe-to-toe with Paris Hilton, you've got to have a spiritual army.
That's true.
You need a fucking kankurang.
And Salaman is like, yeah, of course there was some shit going on. He was making a deal with the entity. What is the entity? We never find out.
Okay, I love that. Okay, because I've actually been like, I don't know if I mentioned, but like my mother's from the Saloum region, and like when I've been in Senegal, people have just randomly like baptized me. Like I'm not even kidding. Some dude I was just chilling with an uncle, and one of his friends came over, threw some liquid at my face, and was like, "I've baptized you." And I was like, "Okay." Like, what religion are you?
It's like, hey man, sorry, I had to do this because of the entity.
Yeah, and like no, like legitimately, like it's a thing of there is some secretive element to the way that I've seen the supernatural approached in Senegal, because quite a few people are believers in marabouts, in going to people, to intermediaries between you and your god or whatever, of like going, like getting people. You'll see a lot of people wearing amulets that are somewhat hidden. You'll see a lot of people wearing protective garbs. People believe in jinn. It's a thing. And I thought the entire approach where like it's oblique, it's an indirect approach to what should be what other films might have directly explained. Like, yeah, you're right. It's just the entity that is extremely fucking vague. I do not know what that means. But I also having been in Senegal, cannot fully say that I fully understand what the spirituality that people are expressing, because it's
just have a guy. Yeah,
it's just, I don't know why that guy did that. I don't know if I'm fucking cursed or not, but like
I don't think so. I think you're probably fine.
Like, baptism's usually good. Let's hope. I think I have no idea what happened there. Right.
Hey, mark of a good movie. By the way, mark of a good movie. We have just spoken about it for longer than the runtime. We just passed it, 1 hour 24.
That's another thing, listeners. It's like an 80-minute film. It's perfect. When was the last time you watched?
It's a tight 90.
Really good.
Yeah.
It's great. So at this point, Salomon deploys his pocket sand. He's been saving this the whole time.
It was very funny that he used the pocket sand, but he gets away. Then summarizing slightly for the sake of time, the cop gets got. He does. Salomon almost gets away, but the child soldiers kill him. And
yeah, they like tear him apart limb from limb.
Shaka smiles. My notes say cool, sick, good, revenge rules.
Yeah. This is the movie giving a thumbs up to revenge within that context of if you train child soldiers, the child soldiers are going to kill you. That's much of a muchness with Shaka. At this point, we go back to Minwi and Awa.
Nobody gets on them about like, what if you kill him, you'll become him. It's like, no, fuck him.
I think it's a benefit of time, you know.
Yeah, and also their children.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, it's fine for children to murder people. I forgot.
Yeah, that's legal. That's
they
been made legal.
Right.
I didn't realize there was a statute of limitations.
They're child soldiers.
It's like
it's legal to fucking frag a commanding officer. It's legal.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's fine. They go and check in on Yuntz and Sephora. I love this bit where Minwi opens the door. He sees two of the fucking giant spirits on top of Yuntz, tearing him apart. Yuntz goes, "Help me, Mr. Minwi." Minwi just closes the door on him. He's like,
nope. Good luck, buddy.
This is a bit much for me. Sorry.
I'm magic, but I'm not that magic.
Right?
Yeah. And Sephora runs out, and we get some horrifying eye trauma, which I always love to see in a movie. A botched laser eye surgery. Awa has to like comfort her. Sephora has like, by virtue of like seeing them devour Yuntz, has like lost her sight, and then she dies in her arms too. Which is a good point for me, I think, to very briefly talk about Final Girls and about how like, generally speaking, in Western horror, you would expect the lighter-skinned woman in this sequence to be the one who survives and makes it to the end, and the darker-skinned one to get tragically killed in a way that we all feel very bad about. So this is a nice reversal, you know?
Especially because Awa is more vulnerable as a mutant deaf woman. You would, in a lot of films, she would have died. Like, they would have exploited her disability and she would have died, you know?
I have another thought about disability, which is coming along in a second. But so Shaka and Rafa get back to the camp where they find that Minwi has held every single spirit sort of like to himself. He has like got them in a clinch, spiritually speaking. And he's just sitting like perfectly still, cross-legged under a tree with like all of these like swirling above his head.
It's a really striking
really
shot.
Well
yeah.
done.
And Shaka like sees this.
Baobab.
You're fucking right. Yeah.
It's underneath a baobab.
Symbolism.
And previously we had seen that like bones, possibly leading back. Like these were probably the sacrificed children's bones, right next to another baobab, surrounded by these fly-looking creatures. And it's like this thing of, and a big thing I picked up from the film was, this is a perversion of spirituality. Like, because in actually West African cultures, a lot of them are Muslim, and Muslims don't necessarily believe in ghosts. Usually, our big spiritual thing is jinn, actually, right? But like this and Atlantics by another Job who I believe her name is Matijo, the director there of that film, which also features the Senegalese version of the supernatural, introduces more the concept of ghosts, of something of haunting, which I was fascinated by. It's a completely modern thing to introduce to not necessarily to introduce to Senegalese cinema, but to adapt this to adapt our spirituality and an understanding of the supernatural to a more international understanding, where like obviously Hervé must have watched a bunch of westerns that dealt with ghosts and whatnot, you know?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it makes me think of like High Plains Drifter is the other movie that I wanted to reference in this, which is again, literally your legacy of violence. It is your marshal who has been killed returns to avenge himself, to avenge his own death.
The headless Thompson gun, etc.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that is literally an African ghost story.
That out
that's literally yeah. They like Warren Zevon mentions fucking Biafra there actually.
So Shaka and Rafa are forced to kill Minwi though, in order to make their escape, and it's this huge emotional moment. We get the second instance of like a character screaming being replaced with a musical sting.
What's good? Point. What's also really good? Yeah, and what I loved was that Minwi is concentrating very hard. He's holding these spirits, and he talks to the two of them in sign language. And the fact that we've got a movie where like the four main characters, all speak sign language, just sort of like and it's not important. It's just a thing that they can all do. It's just lovely. I really, really like that.
Yeah. And by the way, his last line is he points to them both and he's like, "See you soon," which I like. But both as a piece of like action movie dialogue, but also spiritually. So at this point, they still have to flee. They still have to like they've gotten the fuel. They've gotten the resin.
At this point, I'm like, okay, what? So like the rules of his magic weren't like really explained. I didn't really know how he did that. And like, I'm like, if this worked, then why did they have to run? But they run
because he does try to trap the spirits inside of him, but the film does keep going back and back again to the idea of you're not meant to keep things inside of you, like especially like, you know, like, and it's like Minwi tries his best. He's just saving them time.
Saloum at the beginning, Shaka asks him, how do we fight these things? He's like, you don't.
Yeah.
You run.
Right.
Which I like. But so they
also knives.
Yeah, they got to get in the boat, and of course the fear of water, which now it sort of becomes more obvious that this is not a fear. This is not a sort of an anxiety response. This is a spiritual response that you're having to getting on the water. But what I like is Rafa's like grab Shaka and he literally tells him, "Brother, you're going in the boat." And I honestly, if I traveled like that, I think I would probably be a bit better about traveling. But what the thing that I like about this, right, is this is a disability. This is an impediment, right? In this case, it's like a spiritual debt that we're about to see. But he gets in the boat, he is shaking. He is totally incapacitated. I think in a Western movie, this would be the moment where you you have to like conquer your fear in this moment. You have to like get over it. And he fucking doesn't. His friends have to accommodate this thing that he cannot do by like physically moving him. I really like that.
Was a nice
I really
moment,
like that, like, you let a heroic character be vulnerable.
Yeah, Awa wraps him in the little trauma blanket and then just holds him. And I was like emotional at this point. I was just like, oh, because no, like genuinely, like the idea of him having, like, if he had manned up here, as people like to say, and gotten over his fear of like water, it's like that wouldn't be emotionally as resonant to me, because it's like, what would he like? What is the reason that he is able to get over this? This is a man incapable of moving on. He literally came back to the one place he should not have come back.
And that also would have impoverished his relationship with the other two characters.
Exactly. And like, because Shaka came back just to kill Remington, he did not know that the other boys were hostage there, you know?
Mm-hmm. But if we've understood anything from the sort of the spiritual language of this film, you're not going to fucking row out of this situation.
I would. I would simply row out. Revenge is a river. I would simply row that river.
I would simply not drown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
R.I.P. to Chaka, but I'm different.
It does what like supernatural horror or terror, of course, in this case, is supposed to add to it, which is like it's a fundamentally extremely human story that utilizes the supernatural to drive home the themes. And the theme, I'm afraid, for my man, Mr. Chaka, is don't fucking do that. Vengeance is a river.
Vengeance is circular.
And the only way to get to the bottom of it is when you fucking drown, and they're on a river right now.
We see finally the flashback in full, which is he is a child, he escapes into the river with this pistol, and the river takes him, like hands come up from the river and take him. And the sort of the implication is, I believe pretty unambiguously, that the deal that he has made for his freedom, for his escape, is his vengeance, right? That he is going to come back and he is going to kill Omar. And guess who's back? Omar, flaming eyes at this point, clearly dead, tries to get in the boat and is like, yeah, no, you're fucking coming with me, because Omar's gone, you're him now.
Exactly.
It's buddy, that's a fucking cinema.
And you have to remember that I throughout the entire film, after other than the time he takes him off to reveal that he has R branded onto the backs of his hands, Chaka is always wearing this glove, right? Even after the people who love him finally know this deep traumatic thing that's been holding him back this entire time, he still feels the need to hide. And we're told that at the beginning of the film that hiding is going to get you killed, right? Because we also see that Chaka, as a boy, when Chaka walks into the river, he walks in his left hand, he's wearing chains, he's holding chains, and in the right hand, the Remington, right? So it's this little, I thought like when Alice brought up the idea of this ambiguous deal made between the spirits and Chaka as a young boy of like, we will give you liberty, your freedom, but here's your vengeance. Do not come back here. You know what will happen if you try to get revenge. And Chaka just fucks that up. I love it.
Well, he doesn't really have a choice, is the thing. Like the way the narration frames it is, revenge is like a river. But there's a line that I didn't mention, which is our actions are like the canoes that are like being moved by the current. And his actions aren't really his own. He has to fulfill this thing. It's because curses, man, they'll fucking get you.
He finally gets pulled into the river by this entity, and he's like reaching out. Awa grabs his hand, but because he's still wearing the gloves, like you mentioned, because he refuses to finally like accept this, he just slips out of her hand, and that's the fucking film.
No, not exactly. There's and which I was so perplexed by. Because
go on, hit me with the final shot.
The last shot, I think, weakens the message, because I think it's an import of your Western fairy tale thing of like curses easily defeated by simply being pure of heart. He sacrifices himself, right? What happens is a wave of the sort of the particles of these spirits like wash over them, and he changes the movie's color grading. It goes back to being the like. It's actually the first time that we see the river in as like vibrant color as it actually is. It's always been kind of muted and like grayed and yellowed throughout the whole movie. And this is the first time we see it in full color. We see Rafa and Awa in full color in sunlight, in daylight, instead of with like artificial lighting. And it's used really strikingly. But I tend to interpret that as the curse is now lifted because Chaka has like sacrificed himself and he is pure of heart, and revenge is a good thing and all of this other stuff. I think that kind of like ruins the message a little bit. I think it's better, it's stronger if the message is, yeah, revenge doesn't end, and it continues, and the curses aren't separable from the land, and the land isn't separable from the people or its history, and it's all just going down to the same place. I like that better.
I would have honestly preferred if it had ended right when Awa screams, but her voice is replaced by the musical sting, as you said. I thought that would have been a perfect ending for the film. Not any of the because Shaka's just died. We've just seen like this entire like it's very obvious that Shaka is gonna die trying to get revenge. That happens, and then we see the sad moment, and then it ends. I thought that would have been more.
Yeah, it would have been stronger. It's probably why I mentally forgot about the last shot of it. I was like, this is a good film. Done.
Yeah. it is a good film. I have those are my couple of criticisms of it, but in general, I really enjoyed watching it. And I'm not really a huge horror movie person, but I really enjoyed it.
I mean, I'm still saying that revenge is good. Like, it's good, actually. It's good to kill people who keep child soldiers. It's good that the child soldiers killed him. I'm sad that Shaka died.
It comes at a cost.
No.
Well, no, because seriously, if you think about, like, have you ever considered that someone who uses child soldiers perhaps was a child soldier themselves at one point? Like,
yeah. I think the position that the movie takes isn't that revenge is a bad thing, or that, like, I think it takes the position that revenge incurs a debt.
Exactly.
And maybe that debt is worth paying, but you have to do it. And the debt is always really quite severe, which is it's a good theme. I like it.
An eye for an eye is fucking sick, actually. Yeah.
I have two
when
eyes.
you go in search of revenge, dig 2 graves. One for the person you're going to kill, and one as a spare, as a backup.
Free bonus grave. Yeah. It's a secret grave for a thing we'll need
kill
later.
Way more than 2 people.
Well, I mean, do we have any sort of like closing thoughts about Saloum as a movie?
I have so many. I have questions.
It is really well made, like as a piece of film, and like I was sadly not the ideal audience, but like as scenes, shots, music, loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I need. It's missing the point so much, but I need the hyenas.
Yeah, no, I need it.
Immediately.
Right.
Like immediately. Like even just that there's a bit of a hint that Rafa and Awa will become like the new hyenas, because she makes it explicitly clear that she wants to become one of them. And I would even take a sequel. I would even take a sequel with just Rafa and Awa, and like I don't know, fuck, they go fix the Gambia or some shit. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, they take revenge.
Which is cool.
To specify, that would be against you people in this case if we're fixing the Gambia.
Of course.
We're taking
naturally, please, God. I watched Triple R and I loved it. Please take revenge against the whites.
We welcome all acts of anti-colonial resistance.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an absolute fucking treat. ML, if the people want more of you, where can they find you? I'm
on Twitter as Kijera L. That's Kejera and the letter L. I'm one of those writers who I have a bunch of stuff published, but I'm too lazy to set up a website. Just if you're interested in my writing, I write a bunch about the cultures we've discussed here, particularly in my fiction. Just Google my name, you'll find some shit. But what you should especially check out, particularly if you watch the film and you're wondering what are they eating during these dinner scenes, is you should check out my mother's. You should check out my mother's YouTube channel, Day Tida's Kitchen. That's Day Ndey Tida Tida, and you should probably know how to spell kitchen. And the meal that
I would not overestimate.
I'll link these in the description. Don't worry.
Thank you. And the meal they eat in the first dinner scene is chu, Thiou, but pronounced like chu, and it's like a sauce dish with rice. My mother has a version of it with I believe fish balls that you should check out on her YouTube channel.
Yeah, this is now a cooking show. You can cook along with Kill James Bond.
Yeah.
So do all of that. Thank you for subscribing to the Patreon, or not subscribing to the Patreon, because this one's free because of the winter of content. But if you're not, maybe consider it. Maybe do that. Maybe do a lot of things. In the meantime, we will be back with a very special Halloween episode.
I've done a double dip. I've made a choice this time.
You have. You made an executive decision that we're going to do. Not the movie Executive Decision. That's coming later. We're doing a little movie called Jennifer's Body. So
Fuck yes.
excited for that.
It's so good. Literally, Abby just posted in the group chat, yo, we should do Jennifer's Body at some point. And then like 4 hours later, I was like,
sold.
Do you want to do
Immediately
a Halloween special? And she was like, yeah, Jennifer's Body. And I'm like, oh yeah, of course, done. Sorted. Nice and easy.
Asked and answered.
Yes.
Right, well, I'm going to go and dig a bunch of graves. And
I'm gonna go buy some more
take some
Versace.
revenge.
See you, boys.
Yeah.
Bye,
Zero.
I've
everyone.
got this big gun that I need to go and shoot a man with.
Thank you for listening to The Cerebral Zone as we discuss a movie that's actually good. And we're not going to fucking stop anytime soon because the next movie is also a pure force banger, Jennifer's Body. That is right. And then following that, we will be doing another Q&A because it has been a second. It's been a hot second. As of course, this is the winter of content. You can listen to all of these episodes for £0 and 0 cents, $0 and 0 kronen. But if you have spares of any of this kind of currency, in the description of this episode will be a number of charities and strike funds that you can toss some dollars towards. I'm going to be posting this episode while I'm in London on holiday, so I won't have access to my computer to update you on ballots. So for God's sake, if you are in a union, just go ahead and double check that you don't have a ballot coming up. Because we would hate to be given the opportunity to say, yes, I want to strike, and forget to do it, because strikes are sick and cool. Of course, you don't have to be a patron, but if you are, and you pay us £15 or more, you can join these hallowed halls. Christine Fox, Amanda Comet, Fawkes Winchester, Gustavo Lira, Jack Holmes, Paint McCullough, George Rohack, Thomas Oberhardt, Nick Boris, Yarrick Natamori, Coconut Crab, Corios, Benno Rice, Kit Devine, Library Hitman, Beef Crime, Callan Burney, Jonathan Gerde, Jack Drummond, Max Gamenhart, Kentucky Fried Commie, Hell Bloodhands, Jay Martindale, Tarb O, Lisa May. Once again, I'm not going to check how to pronounce that one. Jonathan Siegel, Big Titty Golf Girl. I think if I say it a different way every time, eventually one of them will be right. Mothman, thank you. Ellen Perlberg, Harrison Fuller, Trip, Commissar Jen, Sydney Steckel, Tiger Otaku, Charlie Out of a Closet, Pauline, Will You Marry Jenna? Checking in with you again. Danny Potter, Turfs Eat Shit and Die Alone, Zoe Shepherd, Elizabeth Cox, Finn Ross, Emily Had a Breakdown and forgot to change its name for a few weeks. This, of course, in reference to the username Emily thought this was about short owls, which was in reference to Hedwig and the Angry Inch, but didn't get in time. I hope it is doing a little bit better. Friend of the show, Alfredo Quinn Valeri, I make Devon say this out loud, Wolfie, Big Ol' Boy, Ryle Leal, Alla Owing, Lucy Keeley, Josh Simmons, Lauren Baston, Millie, and Bon LeBon. Kill James Bond is, of course, Alice, Abigail, and Devon. Our producer is the wonderful Nate Bethay. Our podcast art is by Maddie Lubchansky, and our website is by Tom Allen. See ya.